Hello, and welcome to the podcast Handbook for Beginners. In this podcast, you will learn about equipment used, production of, storytelling, and if you're interested in furthering your podcast project, here is a link to an article about monetizing your podcast. On that note, if you are interested in becoming a professional podcaster or developing a hobby for podcasting, here's a few items that you'll need: an XLR or USB microphone, a mixer, a pop filter or windscreen, noise-canceling headphones, a microphone stand, recording editing software. This slide is beneficial for those that would like to produce their own podcast independently in the future. For class, you can simply use your Chromebook, the microphone within your Chromebook, Canva as an editing tool, or you could download a recording app straight onto your cellular device. We're going to focus now on podcast production. First of all, you need to record in the right environment. Unless you have access to a professional podcasting studio, you will need to create a space to record the best possible audio. What makes a good space? No noise from the outside. Close all doors and windows. No machines running except your podcasting equipment. No pets, children, or other people in the room. Lots of soft materials like couches, rugs, blankets, and carpeting to reduce reverb. Spend a few minutes warming up. Your mouth, throat, and vocal cords perform better when they're warm. Before you sit down to speak for 30 minutes to an hour, spend a few moments practicing your script and stretching your face. This will keep you from mispronouncing words and having to repeat yourself. Mute whoever isn't speaking. This is a simple podcast editing tip that saves a lot of time, especially if you're choosing to create a podcast with multiple people. Mute whoever isn't speaking at any given moment. This way, their mic won't pick up their voice, chair adjustment, desk creaking, or other background noises. It's just less to remove later. Plant audio cues for mistakes. Mistakes are bound to happen. Slicing them out during editing is easy, but finding them can be challenging, especially if you're trying to edit quickly. You can create better audio and speed up your editing process by leaving a cue in the track to help you find the flaw later. There's an easy way to leave a cue in the track. Make a loud, high-pitched sound right after a mistake. This will force the volume level to spike up. Look for these spikes during editing to identify the mistakes to cut out. Eliminate background noise as much as possible. We cannot stress this podcast editing tip enough. Every background sound you eliminate during recording means less work during editing. It's critical that you take steps to ensure the only sounds picked up by mics are the sounds you intend. Place blankets or rugs over hard surfaces. Record under a blanket if you have to. Turn off the notification sounds on your phone. Inform anyone else in the house or office that you are busy for a while. Interestingly, your closet is one of the best places to podcast. It's small, which means less surface area to create echoes, and full of soft materials that absorb sound. It's funny, but it works. Here is a picture of Ira Glass, host of This American Life, getting some great audio in his home closet. This was just weeks before they won a Pulitzer Prize for this very podcast. Resolve your audio issues quickly. Many podcast episodes have been ruined by audio issues that no one was aware of during recording. The podcaster opens the file and finds the clinking from their heating unit, the buzzing of traffic outside, or some reverb from their office door. In these cases, you can spend hours editing the entire episode or trash the file and start over. Neither option is much fun. Your best solution is to make a test recording before you officially start your episode. Your goal is to identify any problems and resolve them before recording so audio files that go to editing are as clean as possible. Take strategic breaks throughout recording. You don't have to record your episode in one sitting. In fact, many podcasters find it helpful to take planned breaks throughout the recording. This is strongly suggested. Do not do it in one giant take. These are good opportunities to drink something, have a snack, stretch your legs, discuss what's next with your guest, and check for audio issues. Listen to what you've already recorded to check for problems. If you followed our previous podcast recording tip, there shouldn't be any problems, but it's always good to check. If a problem appears and you let the problem persist throughout the entire episode, you'll have a lot of editing work to do before publishing. Keep yourself well hydrated. Water will settle your nerves, loosen your mouth and throat, and help you focus. It will also eliminate those natural clicking and popping noises we make when our mouths are dry. Most importantly, a hydrated body and brain help you stay focused. Drink at least 8 ounces of water before you start recording. You can always pause to use the bathroom if necessary. Record each person on a separate channel. We all speak differently, but editing multiple voices on a single channel is painstakingly difficult. It's far easier to record everyone on a separate channel. This gives you control over their individual volumes and noise profiles. Most podcast recording software tools come with a multi-track recording feature. Use your microphone properly. Good microphone discipline will keep your voice even and clear. It will also reduce the amount of editing you'll have to do later. These tips are important. Place your microphone even with your mouth. Sit back a few inches from the mic. Keep your mouth off of it. Place a pop filter between your mouth and the microphone. Keep a stable distance from the mic. Closer equals louder. Farther equals quieter. Breathe slow and evenly. Sitting up straight makes your inhales quieter. If you need to inhale or exhale deeply, move your mouth away from the mic. Keep your body still with your feet planted, or the mic will pick up background motion, such as your shirt or headphones wire rustling. Don't move things around your desk. If you like to use paper notes, move them silently. Wear your headphones while you record. When you speak normally, you don't actually hear your own voice. You hear a version of it from inside your head. You don't hear the version that everyone else hears. This is why we all hate to hear recordings of our voices. It doesn't sound right. Wearing headphones during recording puts your ears right in front of your mouth, so to speak, so you can hear your true sound. This allows you to self-review and adjust your voice as you speak to make it more pleasing to your audience. For instance, if you hear a pop every time you say a word with a hard consonant, P, B, K, etc., you'll know to soften that sound. Stay quiet when it's not your turn to speak. In normal conversations, we tend to insert phrases like yes, right, and uh-huh when other people are speaking. These interruptions are often considered polite because they exhibit your involvement in the conversation, but they can be distracting and confusing for podcast listeners. Rather than try to remove these little phrases during editing, which would be a lot of work, train yourself to stay silent while other people on your show speak. If you need to express interest or active listening to your guests and or co-hosts, do so with body language. Be judicious with sound effects. Sound effects can add personality to your show, but only if they're done well. It's very easy to make your show seem cheap and lowbrow with extra elements, especially if you use loud and obnoxious effects. Use these elements sparingly and only when the content calls for it. You don't need that voice. Many people think they don't have the right voice for a podcast. Many new podcasters, consciously or unconsciously, use a different voice while recording than they would in real life. Whether you're tempted to avoid the social connotations that might come from your voice's pitch, upticks, accent, or slang, know that you're not alone. But you can be an excellent podcaster regardless of what your voice sounds like. The best thing podcasters can do is be authentic. Don't sound like your regional radio broadcaster or an uptight professor delivering a dry lecture. Just talk in a conversational voice. Part of what comes down to the script. So be sure to write your podcast script like you would speak in a normal conversation. Leave out the big words or flowery sentences. Trust your ears and instinct. Our last podcast recording tip is the most important. Listen to everything you record and follow your instincts. How does it sound? Does anything sound off? Ask yourself what can be improved, whether through editing this time or through better recording next time. If you're happy with your performance, make some notes about your setup. Create a checklist if you have to, so you can duplicate everything next time. Decide how long your episodes should be. And don't forget to think about your average episode length. How long will you shoot for? Average podcast episode lengths range from the bite-sized podcast of 10 to 20 minutes to a medium-length podcast of 30 to 45 minutes to a long podcast of an hour or more. However, for class episodes, you may only be recording 5 to 10 minutes. Plan out the length of the episode and how you will record it. Organize your workflow. All the best podcasters have an established structure for each podcast and an established structure for how they produce an episode. Creating a podcast episode takes several steps, including outlining, researching, booking guests if you were to interview someone, recording, editing, and then uploading. Give your podcast a distinct brand. Finally, your podcast will be more successful when you take the time and effort to give it a distinct brand. Branding your podcast is simply the process of creating a distinct image of your podcast. You can do this by creating a certain set of emotions, memories, and connections that your audience automatically associates with your show. Your brand is your audience's perception of you, and they'll have one whether you design it or not. For example, this could also mean generating a cool logo, having a catchphrase, or particular music that plays during your intro or outro. So, if you're intentional about designing your brand, you're more in control over how your audience perceives your show, and you're more likely to build a consistently loyal base of fans. Take a moment to consider your target audience, your overall vision, and your goals. Then decide on what style and voice would best match those things. Let your personality shine through. Now we're going to move on to podcast storytelling. You want to start with the what. First, what makes a good podcast? One that knows the essentials from the beginning: what it's about, how to get the message across, and why it matters. What's your podcast topic? Don't start a podcast just because you think it'd be cool to chat with your friends into a microphone. Having a clear idea of what your show is about will help keep you grounded and consistent from the beginning. Then think about the how. Similarly, decide on your content style, structure, and tone for it before beginning. The more you know about what your podcast will be like and how you'll get it done, the less bumpy the road will be as you get started. And while it's certainly allowed to make changes as you go, the more consistent you can be, the easier it will be for your audience to stick with you. Find your why. And of course, ask yourself why you're doing the show. If it's just to mess around with your friends or hustle up some sponsorships, you may want to rethink this project. Without a deeper goal or purpose in mind, you could find yourself floundering or petering out not long after you've begun. Know your target audience. Next, take a minute or several to determine who you'll be speaking to. Don't try to appeal to everyone. If you do, you'll end up appealing to no one. After all, there's a reason why a buyer persona is so commonplace among marketers. Ask yourself the following about your ideal listener. How old are they? What are their interests or hobbies? What kind of job do they have? Where do they live? What are their goals in life? A clear and detailed understanding of your ideal listener can help you create consistently entertaining and relatable content that they'll love. What value do you provide? Once you know your target audience, ask yourself what needs your listeners have that your content fulfills. Whether it's simply providing great entertainment for their commute, giving actionable advice for their professional goals, or anything in between, make sure you have a solid idea of how your show fits into your audience's lives. Find the right structure and stick with it. You'll want to decide on the regular segments of your show before you start. It'll make planning episodes so much easier, and your audience will know what to expect from each one. A common podcast structure looks like this. First, you have an intro, the start of the podcast, where you introduce yourself, your co-host, and any guests. You'll give your listeners an idea of what you'll be talking about in the episode. Main content, the main body of your show, whether it's the guest interview, primary monologue conversation, or audio drama. Then you'll have an outro. This is the conclusion of the episode. Wrap up and give key takeaways. And don't forget to include a call to action, or in podcast terms, a CTA. Do your research. Learn as much as you can about your podcast guests and the content of episodes before you create your podcasts. Peruse credible websites, scroll through your guests' social media accounts, and listen to previous interviews your guests have done. That way you can dig deeper than the surface level and get an engaging and unique discussion. By researching and learning about your guests, you can prepare interesting questions and avoid asking the obvious ones that your guest has probably heard a million times before. Podcast ideas. 100 plus creative podcast topic ideas in 2023. In this article, you'll get an overload of podcast ideas to get your creative juices flowing, no matter your niche or category. We'll walk you through the process of choosing a podcast topic and then share over 100 ideas for inspiration. Let's click on the site and see. Once it loads, go ahead and scroll through. Here are the ideas: personal podcasts, tell me a story from different point of view, deep dives, day in the life of, a mystery theme, business, how to, a book club or book review, top 10 list, travel, short stories, nerdy stuff, history, scripture, art, personal finance, guided meditations, prepping, pop culture. It goes on and on and on and on and on. So here are lots of options to get you thinking. Here is a checklist or a plan. We're already taking notes on podcasting right now. You can watch tips and tricks video and take notes on that. Listen to current podcasts. Read the 100 ideas that I just showed you. Brainstorm and research ideas. Storyboard that idea and then write your script. So important to have a script. And then you're going to record, edit, and ultimately publish. Here's a calendar that we can manipulate for a timeline in how you can do all of these things: recording, editing, publishing, and then when you should be taking a break. If you have any questions about podcasting, reach out to your teacher. Let them know that you're interested in pursuing this idea. Maybe you're going to do an assignment for class. If you want to do even more, again, reach out. There are also Future Ready Friday sessions geared towards podcasting. Sign up for one today. Thank you for listening to the Podcast Handbook for Beginners.